You stepped out of a dream. You are too wonderful to be what you seem. Could there be eyes like yours?
Good evening and welcome to our first budget workshop. Before we start the meeting, I just have two announcements of upcoming events, because I have no idea how many people will last to the bitter end of this exciting event. One is that there's a forum on school safety and security with our senators, Chris Murphy and Dick Blumenthal. That's going to be on Monday at 10 a.m. at Conard. It's not open to the public, so never mind. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Well, then just be envious, because we will be there. I'm so sorry. Thank you for telling me. For the sake of school safety, no one's coming. Okay, well, and the second, I think, is open to the public, is we're going to have, as we always do, two open meetings with the town to talk about the budget conversations. Anybody is welcome. And they're going to be March 22nd and March 27th at, do we know which was which yet?
Philip on the 22nd. King Philip on the 22nd has been confirmed, and we're still waiting on final approval for the other one, but the 27th, a Tuesday, we expect that to be at Duffy.
Thank you, and I just want to say that Dave and Carol were instrumental in setting that up, so thank you both. Anyway, everyone is welcome to come to either or both, ask questions, tell us how wonderful we are, whatever. Okay. Did you say the time was 7, right?
Yes.
Yes, 7. Now what do I do? This is it? So this is for, we just get to ask questions.
We'll go through.
Yeah.
So this is the annual beginning of the real budget workshop summary with you, where we'll go through what the budget for last year was, what actually happened. And as you know, in this town, we have a budget that we stick remarkably close to, considering the large number, but changes do happen in the year, so we'll report on those changes, what happened, and then if there are any proposed changes for next year, why those changes, what we plan on doing with them. It used to be over multiple nights that we did this, but we've condensed this, and part of that is because there's just less dramatic change than there used to be, as we've been in an era of tight budgets. So, with that, I'll turn it over to my team.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. I want to begin by first thanking my staff for being able to put this document together. Donna Murphy, Lisa Newton, Jane Roy, and the folks at the print shop did an amazing job putting together all these individual pages, so we have all this, the detail of the $164.5 million budget broken out into all of these pages. And so we're going to spend some time now going through that. What I want to do now to begin with is I just want to go through some of the preliminary sections with you, and then we'll take some time and go through the guts of the section relating to regular education, special education, general support services.
Chip, can I just interrupt
Sure.
for just a second to say, is it okay if we interrupt at any point to ask
Yes,
questions,
so-
or should we wait?
No, so what we're going to do is I'm just sort of go through what section B and section C are, and then then if you guys have any questions about that, fine, but generally there are no questions in that. And then we're going to break down sections D, E, and F into about 10 different sections, and they relate to your workshop summary sheets that were all in your packet. And we're going to go through each of these sheets one at a time. And at that point in time, you know, we're going to make a presentation on elementary education. And so Andy will talk, and Paul will talk, and then I will talk, and then we'll stop and get your questions for elementary education. Similarly, we'll do that for middle school education, we'll do that for high school education, we'll do that for system-wide education, supervision of instruction. Then Paul will go away and Gretchen will come up, and we'll do that for special education, we'll do that for related services, then supervision of instruction, special education. Then she'll go away, and then Andy and I will talk about general support services.
And what are we going to do for the rest of the evening? Please, thank you.
So, section B in your book has primarily the enrollment projections. This is sort of just a snapshot of the detailed information we presented in November that talks about sort of the overall enrollment projections, which you see on page B1, broken out by grade level, and then on B2, broken out by school, but we've really talked about those as well. B3 has the open choice and interdistrict magnet students, both for 16-17 and for 17-18. The open choice students are coming into our district, and the open choice students are coming into our district, and the district magnet students, and we get revenue from them, and the district magnet students leave our district and attend interdistrict magnet schools, and we pay tuition for them. So we keep track of both of those details.
Again, I'm going to interrupt you only to say that for those people listening, just to be clear, Choice is the program that brings Hartford area students into our schools, and interdistrict magnets are schools that our children in West Hartford may choose to attend, and they're outside of West Hartford, the Greater Hartford Academy of the Arts or whatever. So
Correct.
just so people understand what the references are.
Page B and B4 and B5 detail the special education enrollments by school level and by program separately there, as well as projections for the following year. Schedule C are just summaries of the overall budget information. One is for the combined funds, which is a combination of the general fund and all the big other funds that we talk about at the back of the book in section G. And then on pages C4 through C6 is the detailed breakdown by object code, which is the 4-digit code number of the $164.5 million general fund budget. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this page because we're going to go through that in all excruciating details. We talk about the various little subcomponents of that budget. Schedule C gives you a sort of a summary of the overall expenditures, both the general fund, the other special funds, and then all the other funds that are under the purview of the Board of Education. And the details of what those funds are summarized on pages C7 through around C11. And then C12 and C13 is a position summary for the district of all breakdown of the approximately 1,600 positions, what the categorization of there are between certified staff and non-certified staff, and then the various subgroups within that category. But so we'll turn to your first page of your workshop summaries, which says D4 and D5, and we'll turn to pages D4 and D5 of the budget book. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about elementary education. And this page, D4 and D5, is the overall summary of the elementary education, which we spend budgeting somewhere roughly around $25 million for, and has approximately 310 FTEs. We're going to talk directly to these two pages, which are really a summary of pages D6 through around D20, which details a lot of gory detail. We're not going to go into those detailed pages unless, of course, you have questions about that, and then we'll be glad to answer any questions that appear in those pages. So we're going to follow the standard practice on all these pages, in which Andy will talk about the staffing changes, both from what you adopted in the budget for the 17-18 school year versus what they are now, and then what we're changing from where we currently are staffed now to propose for the 18-19 school year. Paul will talk about any program changes related to those staffing changes, and then I'll talk about what the budgetary impact is on those. So now I'll turn it over to Andy to start us on elementary education.
All right, good evening, here we go. If you remember right, when we go ahead and adopt a budget as far as classroom teachers at the elementary level, as far as staffings, we're going based on projections. And so if you look for this year, we have a 1.0 increase from our adopted 17-18 budget to our current budget, which reflects an additional elementary section. We had projected 203 sections across all 11 elementary schools. We wound up with 204 once we dealt with add-ins and takeaways at various schools. So we're up one section there. We added a 0.2 increase for math support from our adopted to our current to reflect an increase in math support at Smith Elementary School. And then a combined 0.3 increase from our adopted to our current based on scheduling sections across all 11 elementary schools for arts and PE and world language. This is, as we add kids here, take away kids here, we have to tweak schedules and tweak sections, and so this is a result of that. And then finally, the only other section here is for an increase of 2.4 positions that we funded on the page with Title I. And so this is a total fiscal wash in that we're just shifting positions from this budget to our Title I funding for that.
Good evening. Happy Pi Day. Appreciate that. Programmatically, there are no changes scheduled for the elementary school. The only thing I would really mention to highlight the .2 increase in math support at Smith just really represents a teacher who had been part-time based on child raising issues that is sought to be more full-time. And that's one of the positions that we fund through the grant, so we were able to provide that support.
And so then if we take a look at the budget page, details on page D4, I'm going to be saying this a lot, so I'm just going to say this one time only. The salaries here are really a combination of a multitude of factors. One is the teacher contract. So in other words, we have a teacher contract that's in place from, dictates what teachers are going to make in the 18-19 based on what salary lane they're at. We also have staff changes, and I don't necessarily mean adding or subtracting staff, but when we budgeted last year, we assumed certain types of people would be there. They change, their salaries change, so there's all sorts of minute changes that it can add up, and either they offset or sometimes they add to the increase. We also anticipate some retirements in the future, and we recognize those retirements in this process. So overall, if you take a look, we have about total about a 2.39% increase for all of the salaries in this budget, which is a relatively modest increase in salaries, reflecting primarily the teacher's contract. The other expenses here, which add up to roughly, a little under $500,000, are the school-based budgets, are really reflective partially of the school-based budgets, so the elementary budgets. The other parts of the elementary budgets are, you'll see in the supervision of instruction table when we get to that, pages when we get to that at the end. But the important thing to recognize is when we put this budget together, we knew it was going to be a tight budget year. So we told the schools, okay, whatever you had budgeted in 2017-18, that's roughly what you have budgeted in 2018-19. So if you add up all these budgetary increases over across all these pages in the regular education, it's roughly a net increase of around $3,600 or about 0.1%. So essentially they're flat funded through this budget process. So are there any questions that you have on elementary education?
I had a quick question for Andy. Just point of clarification, when you mentioned the 2.4 positions that are going to be funded out of Title I,
Yeah.
is that year over year, or is that something that then the town absorbs?
No, it'll be, yeah, go ahead. It'll be year over year.
It would be year over year. What we did was, given the lessons learned from the budget last year, we looked at what the various positions were that were being funded through Title I, and we moved some of those around, moved some expenses, things that we were paying for under Title I to the town, and we moved those positions under Title I, positions such as our STEM specialist, our IB coordinator, things of that nature. So it was really a net zero difference to the town budget, just a question of who got paid for under what line.
Actually, I do have a quick question. The teacher's salaries, the increase of 2.39, that is, I know you said mostly, but I just want to understand, this is not addition of new faculty. This is the sort of roll forward of existing needs and existing teachers who are getting increases or
as
whatever.
you can see in page D5, we have 311.1 FTEs, 297.8 that are board funded in the current budget year, and we have 297.8 funded next year. Now, the budget that was passed in 2017-18 was before we made this change on the Title I, so we actually had 298.7 teachers budgeted. So we're actually down 0.9 board funded teachers. Why the increase is a little bit less than 3%. Okay,
Good
I'll
to go?
direct you to pages D20, D21, and the second page of your workshop summary.
All right, again, as a quick summary, to look at our middle school staffing changes, the main change we had was a 1.4 increase from our adopted based on some scheduling needs at Sedgwick that we identified. And we offset this by reallocating a person who was in an alternative support role to the academic team, and thereby reducing some of the class size and helping structure more at the academic team. This wound up with a net increase of 0.4 FTEs, and that piece is mainly due to world language splits that we ran into at the middle school level, primarily in Chinese, in shifts into and out of the language and having to run then additional sections.
So programmatically, the only changes this year to next year will be the expansion of our world language program Chinese into the 8th grade. As you will likely recall, we started the program in 6th grade 2 years ago, and it's been expanding each time. As Andy mentioned, the splits last year were a little difficult in terms of about 50 kids. So given the complexity of the language, we've been running about 3 sections at King Philip and Sedgwick, and 2 sections at Bristow, and we're anticipating pretty much equal numbers of sections next year. And that should be a neutral budget item, as whoever signs up for Chinese does not therefore sign up for French or for Spanish, and so as one FTE number goes up, the other goes down to offset.
And the budget is a relatively quiet set of changes, very similar to what we talked about in the elementary side. Overall salaries are going up by about 3.13%. There you do see a decrease in the supplies for the school budget, again, relative, because we held them relatively flat.
Okay.
All right, turn to page D40 and D41, and the page 3 of your workshop summaries.
From a staffing sense, we have a 0.99 overall increase from adopted 17 to current 17-18 based on scheduling needs. And again, the 0.99 is a funny number. It's not that someone shows up 5 minutes late every day. It's a combination of various PE and health sections across the entire district. And so when you're allocating different sections for this person might have one extra section here, they may be traveling, and so that's just how that works out. We also have a 5.5 overall increase from our current 17-18 to next year's budget based on the addition of 79 additional students at the high schools. And so we're projecting about a 3.8 FTE addition at Hall and a 1.7 FTE addition at Conard based on current levels of staffing. Again, that's something that will change and modify based on actual numbers that may or may not occur after the budget is passed, as it happens every year.
So programmatically, again, not a lot here to report. There are 2 budget neutral items, 2 new course offerings for 2018-19. Within our career and technical education, we'll be offering a course in baking and pastry arts. That's a semester course, part of the hospitality pathway, and it will run every other semester opposite ethnic and regional foods. It seems to be popular. There's quite a number of requests for it at both Conard and Hall, so we're anticipating that we'll run a few sections.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Just about the pastry, believe it or not. It just occurred to me, if we wanted to make money by selling this pastry, would we be even allowed to sell it? Or does it violate all our nutritional standards?
I imagine there'd be a number of hoops.
It depends.
Just
You want it to be good pastry.
my point exactly.
The other course is within the science department. There's offering a semester course called Catastrophic Events. This course replaces science investigational skills, which had kind of run its course. Students weren't signing up for it anymore. The one benefit to that the purpose behind the science investigational skills was to provide the performance task opportunities for students who didn't meet graduation requirements. Catastrophic events will do that as well. It has a focus on technology, engineering, concepts related to catastrophic events such as volcanoes, tornadoes, hurricanes, and using those technology and engineering problem-solving skills to identify solutions to impact on the environment. Obviously, as a themed-based course, they're hoping that it will also draw in students that might just be interested in additional science credit. But in the high school, all of these programs are FTE neutral. If I don't take, it's a question of what am I filling my periods with? I might take this over something else. So the addition of new courses typically sees a decreased enrollment in another course somewhere else.
And on the budget side, very similar as the previous sections. The difference is we've got a 5.14% increase in salaries here as opposed to 3% in the others because we're adding the 5.5 FTEs. That's a primary driver there. And then overall, the school budgets are held relatively flat, are held flat. Combine this with the supervision of instruction section. Okay.
All right.
Turn to page D74 and D75 and page 4 of your workshop summaries.
So for counselors, these are now reported in this section. Previously, they had been reported under the special education umbrella, and we shifted them under Paul's side of the house here. So they're reported here under regular instruction. And you see a 0.1 decrease from current 17-18 to proposed, as we have increased the middle school department supervisor role from a 0.5 to a 0.6.
Nothing really here, no change to practice. It's really just a matter of housing counseling under my supervision.
And the salary changes just primarily reflect our normal growth in the salaries per teacher's contract. Okay. Turn to page D81, D82, and D83. Sorry, D83, D84, and D85.
No, 81, 82.
It's 83, 84, 85 is what it is in the book. Sorry.
Oh, you're right. I missed past council.
Paul, as a math teacher, I don't know how you can allow the illogic of a page that says this page intentionally left blank, which therefore leaves it not blank.
As Mark will attest, they do that in the military all the time. Dave, you know.
Military intelligence, it's an oxymoron.
So for department supervisors, we have a 1.0 decrease from 17-18 budget to our current, as one of our world language supervisors was not replaced this year under some budget uncertainty. We left that vacant. We do show then an increase from our current then to next year, as we are budgeting for 2 world language department supervisors, which takes us up to the level we've traditionally been at. Under teachers, you see a 1.0 decrease from 17-18 to our current, as one of the instructional coaches positions was filling in for a vacant CS position and therefore was vacant this year. And we have a 1.0 decrease in our 17-18 budget to current, as we did not replace a secretary that had retired.
Yeah, so just inherently, there are decreases in addition to the budget beside just the roll forward, which we didn't wait to say, hey, you guys cut this, so just as a point of emphasis.
Actually, that's what I was going to both ask and then highlight. So is what you're saying that we're going to keep those? Not,
Yes, the positions that we didn't fill but are still in the budget, we're taking out of the budget.
okay.
So those
that's-
are pure cuts. Because we
Right.
budgeted for them last year, chose not to fill them because we didn't know what the state was going to do to us. Now we've gone a year without it. It's a definite, more than a like to have, but in a budget based on needs, eliminating those two.
Okay, so we can do without them, although we're not happy.
Except
Is that right?
for the world language piece.
World
just not
language
to
isn't,
confuse.
the
The world language
piece
supervisor, we are hiring
stays in the
back.
budget. If that piece continues forward in the budget, we'd advertise for that position.
Yes.
World language would be the only one of the academic areas that would only have one department supervisor across town. So no, I was talking about the teachers,
The
secretary and
instructional
clerk,
coach
sorry.
piece, yes.
Okay, no, so that was my question. Now that we've done without them, has this been a crisis or not? And it sounds like in language it has been, and so we're going to address that.
Well, I wouldn't say crisis.
It's been a challenge.
It's
A
been a
challenge.
challenge, and there is an equity issue, just in terms of the demands of evaluation. But I leave crisis to things that dramatically affect kids, which
Fair
understood.
enough, fair enough. But so then, I do want to point out to the listening and watching audience at home that these are actually cuts in the budget
Correct.
that you have already made in anticipation of us saying, cut the budget, so these count.
Thank you.
For me, I'm sorry, I'm not clear on I'm not clear on the world language supervisor.
Yeah.
We decreased it last year. Well, I should say we didn't replace the position. But going forward,
We are
we're
going.
budgeting for two
Yes.
instead of
We've always
one.
had two. Last year, we had one that went vacant. We did not fill it over last year's budget. We had it approved last year to fill to two. We left it vacant, and so it's been vacant all year, and that's been a savings for the district. Our plan is in this budget to go back to having two. So that's what.
And that was, we mentioned at the end of last year into this year that we needed to freeze anything that was a non-essential hiring place because we didn't know if the state was going to hammer us more. And this gave us a little bit of a buffer with a lot of, you'll see this theme come up again and again throughout the budget where there's pieces we didn't fill. Our plan is to put this back in for this year interview and hope we hire the same person. But that, again, that's up to you.
But the instructional coach and the secretary piece will remain unfilled.
So I did some fat finger math here, and maybe we could talk through it, since we're talking about that. If you go through your version 1.0, and you add up all the plus and minuses of salary on the left-hand side, you come up with 16.55 new employees, and then a -6, which comes up with 10.55 new employees. So if you add the 1.2, the 111, 1.41, 5.5, we know of 2, 0.465, 0.2, 0.3, 0.9, all equals 16.55. And then you take all the subtractions, -1, -1, -7, I don't want to go through them all, but that equals 10.55 new employees. So can we walk through that?
Sure. So if you turn to page B,
Hit your mic.
page C12. So we're essentially dealing in, and so we're sort of, this is the overall summary. So this is the best place to take a look at it. So you see the adopted elementary at 309.6 teachers. The current is 311.1, the budget is 311.1. So we've gone up 1.5 from adopted, but we only gone up 0 from where we are currently now. So what we always take a look at is we'll take a look at where we are currently to what we're going to do, because there are always enrollment changes like that. So we're going up 0 at the elementary level, we're going up 0 at the middle school level, we're going up 5.5 at the high school level, and we're going up, well, we haven't gotten to the special instruction yet, so there's just 5.5 is all that we're going up in regular education teachers. If we take a look at department supervisors, which is down near the department supervisors, middle of the page, we are currently at 21.8, we're going up 22.8, we're adding one department supervisor. So in this section of the budget, we're net going up 6.5 positions, 5.5 for the high school and 1 for the world language department supervisor.
But again, just so that this ties back to the other thing, we're going up one, but we're returning to what we had budgeted originally, just didn't fill.
Correct.
No, I just want to make sure that I understood.
It's
that.
always how you define where your starting and your end point is. My starting point has always been, where are we currently staffed now, and what changes are we going to make for next year?
Right.
So that's why we're up 5.5, and we're up 1, so we're up of a total of 6.5. There's some non-certified staff that are in here, but they're mixed in with all the other ones as well, so they're all decreases. We lost a secretary, I believe, in these pages, and, yeah. So we're up, we're up about 5.5 net overall, all the pluses and minuses that are in there, vis-a-vis where we are currently now. The pluses and minuses here are vis-a-vis where we started off in the budget, but things change along the line. We added an elementary section this year. We added a high school teacher this year. We added a .4 teacher at the middle schools this year. Those are all the things that we've already done this year. So where we're already done, we're fine financially with those additions. What are we changing for next year? And so those are the changes that we're making. 5.5 for the high school FTEs and 1.0 for the world language department supervisor from what we currently are staffing now.
All right, so the budget workshop summary, where I'm coming up with 10.55 new employees, some are non-certified.
No, so those are, you would take a look at the middle column on page C11, and you see we're up 1.5 elementary, we're up 0.4 middle, we're up 6.49, we're down 0.1 system-wide, so we're up 8.29. What? C11. C12, sorry, C12. So we're up 8.29 positions there. That's the change adopted 17, 18 to 18, 19. So we're up 8.29 positions. And then department supervisors is flat, so that's a 0. And so it's roughly around 8.29 is what we're up. You probably added in the 2.4 did you add the 2.4 in the grant funded?
I did.
Yeah, that's not, we're not adding bodies, that's changing the funding source.
So it'll be 8.4.
Right, so, and I've got 8.29, so I think we're good. I think we're close enough for tonight?
Yes, thank you.
And so that's the change from where we budgeted last year, but we've already made changes from that budget. That's, what happens all the time. I mean, we have kids that move in where they're not expected to, we need to make those adjustments for those kids.
And that is the projection from last year to this year. We were over projection, especially at the high school level, but certainly across. We didn't lose as many kids as we had expected to this
At
year.
the elementary, we 60 more kindergarten kids than what we projected.
Could you just enlighten me, what was the secretary position that retired or went away or?
That was the library media specialist secretary. She retired at the end of last year and we didn't replace her.
So that was for like townwide, you mean? Like-
Townwide, yes.
Okay.
We had a library media, department supervisor for library media specialist.
Okay.
That position was cut through the budget process, and then the secretary clerical position retired, and we didn't replace her. A couple other places where we've done that, which we'll talk about that later. Again, primarily because we knew it was going to be a tight budget, so we're trying to, staff appropriately wherever we can. Okay, so Paul doesn't have anything on this section.
Nope.
Are there any questions on the budget side on pages D83 and D84? Basically, it's a relatively flat budget on the salary side, and then a modest increase on the 53, 54, 55, and 5600, but those offset the decreases in the other categories. Overall, it's relatively flat because we funded them basically at a 0% increase. Okay, so we will now excuse Paul and thank him for his wonderful job. Invite Gretchen up to the table.
Mark, do you notice how much quicker he was than last year?
Continuous
We
improvement model.
took away his binder.
He's got a shock collar on.
Wow,
Okay.
it's a rough group.
Can't wait to get up there again. All right, we're going to start on pages E5 and E6. So this is the pupil services budget, and so we're going to cover it in three sections. One deals with special education teachers. Another section will deal with related services, and then finally we'll talk about supervision of instruction on the pupil services side. So we're going to follow the same process. Andy will talk about FTEs. Gretchen will talk about the program changes, then I'll wrap up with a summary of the budget changes. So, Andy.
If you remember right, especially for Gretchen's group and special services, a lot of our needs are estimated based on IEPs and such, but as students move into the district, as needs change, we have changes that are made from year to year. So we'll start off with a 0.5 decrease from adopted 17-18 to current based on student needs. These are shifts that were made from personnel across the district. And then we're also looking to add a 1.0 increase in a technical support position to implement our foods program that I know Tom has shared with you at our post-secondary program and site at ASD Cogswell. So let Gretchen explain a little bit about that in the future. We're having a 1.0 increase from adopted to current based on student needs for behavioral support programming. We're looking to add a 2.0 increase on townwide staffing to address school refusal, school anxiety issues, looking at that from a management standpoint of trying to get students into school, trying to work with families and engaging with them as well. Our resource program shows a 1.2 increase from adopted to current, again based on student needs that change after our budget is adopted, and a 0.1 decrease in adopted to current based on student needs that have occurred at the preschool level.
Got a question on, Tom, is it expected that with the school refusal position, over time, it might more than pay for itself? Is that a thought?
Yes.
So would you like me to introduce that one first? Hello, by the way. Thank you.
Did you get the shock collar? I didn't know.
No, he took it with him. Yeah, no, I'm usually pretty succinct. So I can skip ahead and...
I'm going to move over here so the lightning won't hit me too.
So I can skip ahead, Dave, and answer that question and talk about that particular proposal for the change in programming. We have had an alarmingly increased number of students who are having difficulty accessing their education in the building. In school. And a lot of this has to do with the mental health issues that I know we're all aware of, that we hear about, that we read about, and that we see in our schools. But we have students who, for a lot of different reasons, are having difficulty coming into the building. And our school-based teams are doing everything that they can. They're using all the interventions that they have. We are continually looking to improve those models and to adjust those models, but there are times when students aren't coming in for a long period of time, and so we are paying for outside programs to address their needs, if we can even get them in those programs. Sometimes we're relying on homebound instruction to meet their needs, and it's not okay. We need students in the building, and we need them accessing their education. So yes, to answer your question, I am proposing that we put 2 certified staff and 2 non-certified staff together, kind of on a team, a task force, if you will, to help our schools proactively address some of these issues, specialize in this particular area, but then also meet the needs of some of our students who need the most intense support. And so they would be able to do that by addressing a family dynamic system that our current teams just don't have the time to do because of all the stresses and the work that frankly they're doing in their schools. And so that's why we're asking for this. But I think over time, if we're effective in what we're doing, then it is going to pay for itself because it will decrease our out-of-district costs.
So just to help us absorb it better and to explain it, to be very specific, probably not the first year, but as things get up and running, we should see a cost neutral.
I mean, we'll see savings the first year with IOL spending and...
We should.
Okay.
Show savings right away.
Nice, thank you.
With what is being discussed and with what's being discussed and proposed, and for those students that may need these additional services, is there something to help when they are ready to return back to make it a seamless transition? So although there are these separate positions, will there be some line of communication with current staff members?
So I think the goal, I know the goal is for this team to work directly with schools, both proactively, but also to transition back. And so that may mean bringing students back to almost a neutral environment within the school system and then helping them acclimate back to a town-wide building and then slowly move their way back to school, but also consulting with those school-based teams about strategies that they may not have thought of before, that might be simple implements to get students back and feeling more comfortable in terms of partial days, short periods at a time, a room location that's close to an exit, things like that. Okay. The other program change that we're proposing, that I'm proposing on this page, is to include a position for someone to come, an industry expert, to come in and really start a culinary training program at the post-secondary level. And so we have a growing number of students who are in our post-secondary program, who are 18 to 21. They have earned enough credits for a diploma, but they have not met their transition goals on their IEP, and they're still entitled through IDEA to receive an education as long as they qualify through 21. And so those students that are in this program have direct needs in terms of functional academics and vocational and community-based training, activities of daily living skills, so that they can be as independent as they possibly can when they finish our program at 21. And we know that the state funding has decreased in terms of supporting young adults in employment situations. And so it puts more of a burden on us in a positive way to really make sure that students have as much independence as they can by the time they leave. And so the more opportunity we have to teach in authentic settings, the better. And so having a culinary training program right within our building, which we now have access to a large commercial kitchen, will increase opportunities for students to train. And bringing somebody in who can really be that bridge and that liaison between the school system and as Tom pointed out the other day, the natural resource here in West Hartford of the restaurants, I think will continue to add that ability to have our students learn how to work in their own community. They won't need to leave West Hartford in order to find employment.
So I had the pleasure of a tour, and thank you, and we were able to peek inside and see it, and it's a nice facility. It potentially can be a very nice facility for the the kitchen itself. And I was just thinking, there are some meetings here that we have sandwiches and such, and there's a nice pairing there that we could potentially use them for particular meetings here at Town Hall, or even the police department and fire department when they have their meetings, that we could take advantage of that.
And that's exactly why we want somebody that's not just that kind of visionary piece with working with the restaurants, working with the businesses, but also, okay, how do we establish our own business profile for these kids there that we're working, that they're running, and those kind of opportunities. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing we would hope would grow out of this.
Thank you.
I will say one additional comment about this. This issue isn't going away in the state. It's before the legislature right now, a bill. Everybody recognized that the state's pulled away its funding. The solution in the legislature right now is a bill that will change the requirement from public schools educating till 21 till 22. Not with any extra funding. Just now you have, listen, but that would be a significant funding increase for us in teachers in the building and support staff in the building. It's one of those unfunded mandates if it passes, and I'm not saying it shouldn't pass, but the question is, at what point does it move from the public education system to a transition system. That's what we're trying to do here, really. So.
On the budget side, the salary increases primarily reflect the contracted increases plus the 4.6 or so salary increase, FTE increases there. The big increase is in line 5430, tuition. This is our net cost for our out-of-district placed students. Our gross cost is around $7 or $8 million for all of these students. Roughly 80 or so students is what's being projected for next year. And then what we pay the full cost and the state reimburses us the excess cost. They used to reimburse 100% of excess cost, and so each year it's been decreasing. So for next year, we're budgeting an assumption of only 68% of the excess cost is what we're going to get back. So we're on the hook for 30% of that, those high-cost special education students. And the rest of the budgets are relatively flat. I mean, we basically flat funded the department for supplies.
May I just ask?
Sure.
5116, technical support salaries?
Yep.
That's also an increase. Can you say something about that?
Yep, that's the technical support person for the foods program.
Oh, that's the single person?
Right.
Okay, I gotcha. Thanks.
All right, we're moving on to E21 and 22. This is related services, again, changes based primarily on student IEP needs, a 0.5 decrease from what we budgeted to what our current is for social workers, a 0.9 increase from budget 17-18 to current 17-18, again based on student needs, speech language therapist 0.7 decrease from budget to current based on IEP and student needs, and then a 0.65 increase from budget to current to meet the needs of increased number of hearing impaired students, and for next year a 0.4 increase from our current to our budgeted next year to meet the needs again of the anticipated needs we have of hearing impaired students in the district.
And then on the budget side, just relatively flat on the salaries. It just reflects, teachers who are employed this year are lower cost than what we budgeted for, but they'll get their normal increase. And then a relatively flat budget for the supplies in this account, in these accounts, sorry.
Gretchen, could you just touch on the increased number of students, both deaf and hearing impaired?
So we've had a pretty dramatic increase of students who are deaf and experience hearing loss, and we've had a number of students moving in, and they have moved in throughout the year. I think one of the, Tom often talks about the destination district, and we have ASD in our town, and so they appeal to a large audience throughout the country, and I think that often in conversation, they explain that West Hartford is a system that's very warm and welcoming, and so families who might be interested in receiving an education or part of their education at ASD will come here, register, and want to also be part of the West Hartford Public Schools. And so we have a higher than average prevalence rate for students who are deaf or have hearing loss. And so as those students age and they need interpreters in the middle schools and the high schools, we have an increased need for that. We've also seen a pretty dramatic increase in the number of preschool students that are coming in who are deaf and have significant hearing loss and require interpreters. So it's also it's compounded by the fact that the state of Connecticut used to have a pool of interpreters that we were able to pull from, and they closed that department. So now if we need interpreting services outside of our current employees, we need to find them on our own from agencies, and so the cost of that has dramatically increased. We've kind of started running our own employment agency, if you will, and keeping more subs on for interpreting to cut down on the costs.
Recognizing how wonderful our town is and certainly the school system and how we're able to accommodate any student that comes to us, with what you've just shared, how open are the lines of communication with ASD and the school district here?
So I've had the opportunity to meet with them a number of times and share my concerns about that families do move in and we are often presented with needs that we didn't anticipate and we can't budget for. And so we've had some dialogue about that. I'm not sure that we've come to any conclusions, but we certainly have dialogued about it.
Gretchen, I guess my question is, what do you find, I guess, the greatest influx of those kids coming into the system? Is it before the school year starts? Is it mid-year? Or is it all over the map?
It's all over the map. We do have families that move in over the summer, but we have probably had 5 students move since the start of school this year, move in.
Could you clarify for me how that works? Is it almost like an interpreter is assigned to a student and follows that student to different classes?
So each student has an individual set of needs depending on their level of hearing loss and the type of education that they've had up to this point. Some students will use an interpreter as a form of communication. And so, yes, the interpreter is there to interpret any time the student is interacting with another person. They're not there to instruct or to teach, but purely to interpret. So it's an additional layer on top of their hearing impaired instruction.
Can I ask I think an ignorant question, which is, what does the American School for the Deaf do?
So they are a boarding and a day school, and they also provide services, but they provide them in a more restrictive environment in that all the students on campus are hearing impaired or are deaf. And so here in a public school setting, students are in a public school setting with lots of different peers. And so for some families, their preference is to have their child educated in more integrated setting as opposed to a more restrictive setting. There is a Deaf Bill of Rights. And so through the Deaf Bill of Rights, we need to provide opportunity for deaf students to be with other deaf students. And so some of our students will have a partial day with us, and then they'll go over to ASD to take one class and participate in sports. And so there are lots of ways that we can meet their individual needs.
Okay.
Okay, pages E33 and E34. And this one's really the chip show.
Yep.
So the big change here is just the normal increase in salaries except for teacher assistants, line 5185. And so in 5185, you'll see the teacher assistants rate going up by 12.92%. This is really a combination of a couple things. One is we have a basic TA rate, which currently this year is $85 a day. Or $87 a day, I'm sorry. We'd wanted to increase that to $90 a day last year, but because of the budget increase, we weren't able to. So we're now going back to a regular rate for all TAs of $90 a day. But also recognizing the special needs of the special education TA and special requirements of that, and in order to increase the pool for special education TAs, we're increasing that rate to $95 a day, proposing to increase that rate to $95 a day, and that's why you see that increase there. The other big increase is in professional technical services, and that's the cost for the independent educational evals, the interpreting for the hearing impaired students when we can't provide it ourselves, as well as for some outside technical services for special education services for kids. And that number you saw in 2015-16 was $331,000. In 16-17 it was $454,000. We budgeted $427 this year. Knock on wood, we'll get there. We're budgeting $466 for next year. That used to be, when I started this gig about 8 years ago, it was about $80,000. So it's changed drastically over the last eight years or so. So any other questions?
I actually have a question about something that you didn't raise that never occurred to me before, which is, I understand what we do for deaf students. Do we have programs for visually impaired and blind students, or is that a whole different place?
Yes and yes. So we do have students who are visually impaired, and we use the state agency, BESB, and we bring them in to provide services. Those students are also educated in our district with our special ed teachers and in consultation with this group that is still intact with the state.
Okay, so last section of the budget coming up. We've done regular education, we've done all of pupil services. We can give a big round of thanks to Gretchen for a wonderfully succinct presentation. And we'll turn now to pages F2 to F5. We'll start on F5, which is the staffing changes, and Andy will go through that.
So we have a 1.0 decrease from our last year's budget to current as we transferred a position, HVAC, to the town, reflecting the revised responsibilities there. So that was taken off our book and is now being, that role, that FTE is being paid by the town. And we also have a 1.0 decrease to a accounts payable clerk, that again, this was someone who retired that we did not replace and will not replace going forward.
So now I'll go through some of the budget changes on pages F2 to F4. The first big one that I want to highlight is in 5180, teacher substitutes. We have an increase of around $136,487. That reflects really two factors. One is our current utilization, as shown in the financial report. We're up about $100,000, and the balance is from increasing the rate from $87 to $90 a day. In 5201, that's our health insurance. This year we budgeted 24.4, and next year we're budgeting only 24.6. Basically, we're having a very good year so far on the claims, and anytime I do say that, I knock on wood. This is something we have absolutely no control over. I mean, people get sick or don't get sick. We've instituted a series of programmatic changes in terms of all of our teachers and administrators and professional technical are in the high deductible health plan. The next unions that are coming up for negotiation, we're switching over to high deductible health plan, where that employee is responsible for either the first $2,000 single or the first $4,000 if it's a two-person or family of medical expenses, to try and help control those costs. So, and looks to be so far pretty good. I mean, our estimates for this year, our total claims are going to be about $500,000 below what we projected. We also have slightly more claims, slightly higher share of those claims for retirees and for actives. Actives are paid out of a separate bucket than retirees, so that helps us as well. And then we have the higher costs because we have additional staff. Whenever we add a staff person, I always add about $16,000 to $17,000, which is the net cost per employee for these very benefits. So we'll take a look at this thing again in late March, once we get the claims through February, which we should have sometime in next week or the week after, and we'll see if there's been any adjustment. I don't expect there will be. I mean, we're in a pretty good spot. I don't think there'll be an adjustment, but we will take a careful look at that.
Can I ask a quick question
Sure.
about the health insurance, the health part? If I recall, and I may not be right, the proportion that has to be paid by the teacher actually goes up again
Correct.
this year. And so does that help keep the
Yep.
cost to the system
That's
down
all,
also?
that's all factored in. That's all factored in there. When we project what the employees are going to contribute, it's all, what our HSA contributions are, all of those. There are 25 or 30 different factors that go in there. But yes, it's going up by another 0.5%, I think, this year on the teacher side. So it's good. Every little bit helps.
Right, what I meant was, we're paying part of the cost as the
Correct.
town, they're also paying part of the cost as the
Correct.
teachers.
And they pay a big part of the cost because they're paying the first $2,000 or $4,000 worth of expenses. So,
Chip, could I
Sure.
ask, go back to teacher substitutes, pay increase to $90 per day. How do we compare with surrounding areas?
let's, little bit below average, I would say. Some are up to $100, $110 a day.
Thank you.
Unemployment compensation, we budgeted $237,000 last year because, as you remember, last year we had substantial reductions. We had 17 FTEs position reduction in the budget, given how tight that was. We're not projecting any major reductions here, just the normal types of turnover. So we're returning our unemployment expenses back down to a more normal level. Townwide pension, line 5211, you see a $309,791 decrease. This is a combination of really two factors. One is there's an overall increase in the total pension contribution, and the pension plan is a combined town and board obligation. And so historically, the board has always contributed 25% of whatever the actuary says is the total amount that could be contributed. Well, this year, we had the actuary calculate what our share would be if we ran it by ourselves, the board's employees themselves, and that it turned out to be only 21.3%. So our contribution dropped by around $896,000 as a result of that shift. Net decrease was around $309,000. Next big increase is in pupil transportation, 5345. We got about a roughly $475,000 increase there, around 6%. That's primarily a reflection of the contract. We had a 5-year contract with First Student. This is in conjunction with the town. The town is the bidding agent for this. Pays for both the public school transportation and the private school transportation. And that went out to bid, and the low bidder was First Student again, but it's an increase of around 7% in the rates based on the competitive bidding. Line item 5371 is a $152,000 increase. That is just our contribution to the town-managed risk fund, which covers all the costs of our workers' compensation, all of our property and casualty insurance premiums for all of our school buildings, as well as any liability policies. And that's really numbers just given to us by the town based on current trends. Within utilities, 5380 to 5382, we've got an overall increase of around $221,000, reflecting primarily higher costs for electricity and gas and water. Our water costs are going up substantially. I'm sure any West Hartford resident would recognize that cost. It just gets multiplied to a much bigger amount at our level. Utility Services Fund, for many years now, we don't pay the utility services bill directly. We make a fixed contribution into the Utility Services Fund, and Utility Service Fund pays the actual bills. And to the extent there's a surplus or a deficit in that fund, we can amortize that over 2 years. So we've always run a surplus in our Utility Services Fund, and it helps reduce our expenses. The next big item is line 5420, rentals. It's going up by $200,000, and it's a combination of two factors. One is the higher rental costs for the Cogswell building at ASD compared to the Wampanoag building, so that's roughly a $100,000 increase in the rentals line item. There's some savings in other areas to offset that, but we see it in the rentals line item. And secondly, we had the real sweetheart of a deal in our copier contract for 8 years. It was an amazing deal. I just can't,
Songs were sung.
Songs were sung. But songs will be sung about how sweet a deal we had. But so the deal was up. We had it. They bid it. They won it. They agreed to extend it for 4 years. So we've had it for 8 years. So now our costs are going up by about 50 or 60%. It still went to the lowest bidder and still represents an excellent value for us as a district, but our costs are more reflective of what we should have been paying. So there's roughly another $100,000. We do 30 million copies a year in a district in total. Yeah, we're still a paper-based business. And then contracted services, you see an increase of $202,462. That's really, you take a look at our historical expenses for contracted services. We haven't really budgeted that amount correctly. And so what we did is we tried to bring that up close to budget, but that's offset by reductions in 5556 maintenance supplies, 5560 gasoline, and then on the following page, 5621 building improvement contracted. So those are it in terms of the major highlights on the general support services, and we're glad to answer any questions you got.
So Chip, outside of a sweetheart deal on the copier, what was the overriding cost for the new why, 4 years ago, was it just such a sweetheart deal? Did they get the numbers wrong?
Yes.
Oh, okay, they got the numbers. I wasn't expecting that answer. So what's our overall cost? Is it 100?
About $200,000 a year, spread out
200,000?
over all departments.
And that doesn't include paper, that's just the...
That's just the cost of the print of the,
So, we built Charter Oak, and we tried to go green as possible, and, with the deep well system. Is there any way, 30 million, that just number, I guess I've never heard it before, but that's overwhelming to me. And I bet you if you break it down, it's probably not that much.
no, it's not that
It really
much.
isn't that much.
But is
We
there
have- we
any
have-
way we could,
We have 10,000 students. No, we're still,
And we do wherever possible. We've had significant shifts at the upper elementary, middle school, and high school level under Google Classroom platforms, and we have really tried to move into digital resources wherever possible. But there's still a need for paper. There's still a need for work and classroom activities that require it.
it's not, we're not incredibly out of the range of what other, districts do. I mean, it's just, but we're still a paper intensive business because, it's a lot of that is that tactile feel to get that.
yeah, it's interesting that, and I'm fiscal conservative, the 200,000 doesn't sound all that crazy to me, but 30 million does. So,
No, think
Just-
of it as 200,000 then.
yeah.
May I ask, what's the length of the new bus contract and the length of the new copy contract?
5 years with an extension possible, and then 4 years with an extension possible.
Okay.
Amount of time for a contract?
It fundamentally reflects the lifetime of the underlying capital piece of equipment. A bus is good for 5 years, and a copier is good for 4.
As part of the new contract, we'll be having a new fleet of buses that will also go into effect. So,
And then, may I ask, are those buses nice and pollution-free type? or
they're not pollution
better?
free, but they
They're
are.
not
But
Tesla
they are.
buses.
But they are up to. They're up to all the current standards. Correct.
Wonderful.
In that spirit, and in the spirit of Mark's green question, utilities, the heat is up a lot. I understand that's because heating costs are up a lot. Are there ways that we might do better at conserving or producing heat or energy environmentally happily?
Yes, and we have taken those steps. Our gas consumption continues to drop year over year. Our cost doesn't drop because the price keeps going up, but our underlying gas consumption, as we replace boilers, as we replace heating and control systems, Charter Oak, we hardly use any gas at Charter Oak because they're geothermal. So, I mean, we are making those types of investments. The payback on those are not really, you can't justify that type of investment for just the energy savings. So it's when you've reached the end of the useful life of the underlying piece of equipment, you replace it. Whole boilers were, each whole boiler was the size of this room, and there were 4
They
of
were
them.
the old Navy discards.
And the new boilers are about the size of this table. It is amazing. And so you gradually see those types of decreases on the heating side. But, it is winter, you don't want to keep, there's a certain minimal amount of heat that's required. On the electricity side, we've been approaching that on multiple fronts. We are, in 2008, 2009, we consumed 13.6 million kilowatt hours as a district. Big number, I know. We are now down to under 10. And so that's been a combination of multiple pronged strategies. First of all, we have adjusted our computer policies in terms of mandating, that they all go to sleep at the end of the day. If people don't turn them off, they go to sleep into a low power mode. We have installed energy efficient lighting in all places that we can, and we keep upgrading those things with higher efficiency lighting. We have installed improved controls to make sure lights are off if there's nobody in the room type of thing. And then we've installed solar power on our roofs, both to back out demand or because it's a cheaper alternative cheaper purchasing alternative. So all of those, the solar is not, the big ones have been, controlling power consumption by all of our computers, replacing lights, and then turning lights off when people aren't there. So we've seen substantial savings in that in terms of demand and amount of energy used. Our price is barely, we always keep spending about $1.8 million a year because CLMP still needs the same amount of revenue. So if everybody's like us cutting it, the price keeps going up. So I wish I had better news on that, but we are avoiding substantial amounts of costs. I mean, this could be $500,000 a year higher had we kept our consumption at prior levels.
And the last question that I have on this, at least, is those of us who were here last year will remember that one of the things that we did was cut our membership in CABE because we thought we shouldn't be spending money if everything else is being cut. We've recently been approached, of course, by CABE asking that we rejoin. So I'm just asking what impact our not joining CABE had. Is that where the conferences and meetings cut is, or is that something else? Or
It would have been dues and fees, 5592.
55 what, 92? Oh, next.
Top of F4.
Oh,
Top of F4.
Yep.
oh, so it's still going up. I mean, it's still an increase.
Well, it was, so if you take a look at 2015, 2016, that's when it was in there. So it's roughly $24,000. So we cut $24,000 out of the budget, so that's why it's only $21,000. We kept it at that level.
I see. Okay, so this budget assumes we are not adding, and if we
Correct.
did add, it would add to the
You
budget.
would have to increase the budget for that amount, yes.
By 24, okay, we need an answer, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got to say, Tom presented this budget to the PT Council immediately prior to this meeting, and I jotted down some of your lines there that I may be using going forward, but one of them that Tom mentioned here was about low-hanging fruits, and everybody talks about there's got to be some easy things we can do to save some money. And Tom mentioned, the low-hanging fruit, that was picked about 5 years ago. And I think you're really proving that with the comments tonight. We're up to things like timers and automatic lights. That's not really cheap to do. It's saving money, but it costs money. So I appreciate that and reinforcing what you had said.
Dave, don't get caught with Tom's plagiarism if you're using his words.
I'd like to point out it's not Tom's plagiarism.
I was just going to say.
Tom's words,
He's
Dave's
embarrassed
plagiarism.
because he's
Sorry.
the cause of it, exactly. It's your skill as a wordsmith.
I had a question. This is more of like a newbie question when it goes back to the busing contract. Could you explain to me where it is established as far as a school policy or rule about, obviously we know like if you're within a mile, you don't get a bus.
Yeah.
And so I have a couple questions. Explain that first.
That's actually the state of Connecticut has established guidelines
Okay.
that high school students, if you're within a 2-mile radius for high school students, you're not obligated to transport them. It's a mile and a half for middle school, and then a mile for elementary. That's the state guidelines, and we, like most districts, say that we follow the state guidelines on that.
Okay.
Walking, not driving.
It is. It's walking distance,
Not driving.
not driving
So that's
distance.
shorter sometimes.
So that we have to stay within those guidelines, basically.
You don't have to. You, as a board, can decide to vary from those guidelines if you'd like. But that is generally the accepted practice, is to follow the state guidelines for a number of reasons, including safety and other issues. And there's other factors that factor into that as far as time that you're walking and when they're starting certain routes as well.
I will say, just in historical data, about 5 years ago, we did have a transportation hearing, like
We had one 2 years ago, too.
2 years ago, too, where it was like 1.99 on Google's Maps and 2.01, and we weren't providing transportation, and we lost. So
We had one 2 years ago that it was well under, and we won. So it's
We actually had an email where a parent was complaining, and oh, by the way, they did their due diligence and they took that bus stop away. So, because it was a special bus stop for some construction, so.
You know, one thing that I think is, do you want to talk about the difference between, because there's transportation, special education. There's actually two bus contracts.
Yes.
Special education and,
What's that?
so.
No, well, there's
The
two
new
bus
one.
contracts, one for
Yes.
in-town education for both regular and special education, and the other is for out-of-district, just for special education students, obviously.
Students who may be in separate programs, they may be day programs that we transport back and forth.
Right.
And about half the cost is for special education in total, and half the cost is for regular education.
So in years past, has there been any analysis about like if we tweaked those numbers a little bit and added just a little bit on the high end, like the environmental impact that would be a benefit, and then also the cost savings? Is it negligible, or is
Well,
it?
we can't speak to the environmental impact. I mean, anytime you're taking less buses off the road, you can factor in, well, okay, well, I'm driving more as a parent, so I don't know that that's a factor. You can certainly, we haven't ever looked at it, but we could certainly make the assumption if you were to change the boundaries, you would have more people walking and less people busing.
Yeah, that would be a decision that the board
Yeah.
could make if you have an nobody's brought it to us before as the appetite for increasing those limits. So
But,
that would be.
And I don't know of any districts that have stepped outside of the state guidelines on that.
Right, because we would have issues, right, with the state, we can make them shorter, right? It's
No,
tough to make
you
them, can we make them longer?
It's not
The stuff-
by
the
law,
gate
there's
guides aren't
called
binding.
guidelines,
Yeah.
not law, so it's
They're
a,
not binding, but they are generally accepted recommendations, and they're followed by, I don't know of any districts that don't.
yeah, it's the interesting question. That's why going to the hearing with it, I was like, how can we lose if these are guidelines? But we did, so.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, am I going down a rabbit hole where it's like, yeah, it's $20,000 savings, Rob, or is it something where if we made these adjustments, it could be a significant?
I don't think
expenditure
you'd see
savings?
significant changes, because again, you remember that you're dealing, the ones that you would most likely change would be the upper level kids, students. And then when you factor in certain roads that we don't have students cross because of traffic issues and such, I'm not sure you'd see significant savings on that beyond a 2-mile radius that they already have.
And the other thing to recognize is we operate a 3-tier bus system, so if we got rid of a high school run, say, that might not save us any money because we still need that bus for the elementary run. So you really have to take a look at it systemically.
Right.
And so you have to, in order to, and elementary is the limiting factor on the bus run, so we need to eliminate elementary buses.
And we do look at that, and one of the things that we have talked about with our new group in the new contract coming in is sitting down this spring. Chip and Damaris Torres, who's our Director of Transportation, myself will sit down and look at all of the different routings to see where we might be able to find some different efficiencies and to see where there may be some legacy issues that haven't been addressed over the years.
I mean, just experientially over the years, we are so much more efficient with busing than we were 10 years ago, because it used to be the biggest complaint area. I mean, September was just constant. The board would get it, I'd get it, about why aren't there buses here? So I would say that the people that are elementary students that are 1.1 miles away are very upset with the 1.0 mile rule. The 1.6 at middle school, 2.02 at the high school. So again, it's something, if you direct us to, we'll put together something for you that you could look at. It would be like anything, and you ask a fair question. It becomes tough to take things away from people. So that inherently, there would be somebody that has it now that doesn't have it.
Right.
Which I'm happy to direct them to your phone number.
That's fine. For the record, we're 0.9 from the elementary school, so, you adjust. It's just something that I kind of thought about where I'm like,
Sure.
if we did say, instead of a mile and a half for elementary and so on and so forth, it's just curious if it would help us. I mean, obviously, I don't expect you to be a climate change expert, but, there's certain people in town that like to hear that we're doing things like that and considering like the environment, but, it's a win-win to me if it would be environmental savings and then obviously the fiscal savings.
And I don't know, and again, West Hartford being what it is, I don't know how many students or how many families you'd say, well, my child will walk the extra half mile versus I'll just drop them off and drive separately. I think you'd see commensurate increase on traffic at our schools for parents drop-off.
Yeah, if everybody used buses,
That'd be, yeah,
that would be the biggest environmental savings we could get. I mean,
yes.
I was just going to ask if you would say something about that, because people often say things like, well, but the buses run half empty, and what about that? And either I can repeat it, or you can say the answer to that, because I know a lot of people said this to me, and it would be nice for everybody to hear
And
it.
we fully book the routes. What you have are, and it's tough because people say, well, the bus went by me and it was half empty. Okay, but you don't understand that the fact that there might be 10 kids on that bus who are after school for sports, or who are doing the play that day or meeting with their robotics club. And so there's a discrepancy there oftentimes. That's also why we work very hard come October, beginning of October, to do the empty seats program, where someone who might be 0.9 miles away can then walk 0.1 to the nearest bus stop and take the bus in. And so that's why we try to maximize that. But we constantly are adjusting that. If we truly find that a route that we thought was going to be needed is underserved, we will reroute that and try to collapse different areas. You also see different buses across town now going to Charter Oak, which may be coming from different areas to Smith, and certainly then to Bristow, which, again, we try to maximize as much as possible, but you're going to have some routes that are underserved for that.
Well, and I do want to add something that you at least explained to me that I thought was really helpful, which is that, as you said, a lot of people drive, but
Sure.
we are obliged to make sure that if every child
Absolutely.
wanted that seat,
Yeah.
there would be a seat for
Yes,
them.
we don't get the option of saying, sending in a card saying, if you decline busing, please let us know. Because again, it's there's lots of kids on the bus until the first day it rains or snows. And then it's amazing the number of parents who are, because they don't want them sitting at the bus stop or whatever. And I don't begrudge that, I would do it myself. It's just it's a different mindset sometimes with that.
and at the high school level, certainly, because when people talk about empty buses, they're really talking about the high schools for the most part, and they're most often talking about the afternoon runs.
Yes.
But the other thing that's true is, every day of the high school year, there's less kids that don't have their license. So as what you need on day one versus what's coming, but still, the fact remains that that bus is still needed for an elementary run.
Yep.
So that's the problem.
I could just give you an example. The after-school bus at Hall, I actually got in trouble, and I was pretty embarrassed because I thought there were so many kids out there waiting for it that I thought it was a sports bus, and they were just picking up, and they don't usually put the red lights on for the sports bus when they're picking up. And it was the after-school bus, and I kind of just drove by like I normally do, and the guy's beeping my horn. I'm going, what? It's, I blinked 100 times. It's always the sports bus, or it's this, it's that. And that time, because there were so many kids, because that bus was full, I actually got out and apologized to the guy because I didn't realize, but I know, I felt really bad. But it's full. That's a big.
Yeah.
I have a question regarding transportation, but from a different source, recognizing that more recently, the open choice students now have transportation provided to them, but it's paid, I understand, through CREC.
Correct.
Is there any type of communication that's had to ensure that that will be something more secure and long-standing?
Yes, our understanding in talking with them, both with myself and with Rosina, is that is now a permanent part of their budget. And there's no talk about removing that.
And I want to add that took years
Yes.
of arguing and negotiating, so that's really a tremendous victory for us in general. That was very hard to win.
I think, yes, I agree. And again, recognizing I'm new here, but it was certainly disheartening recognizing that certain privileges were not allowed for those students. And as we're talking about weather-related issues and waiting for the bus, recognizing that there were students that had to come from even farther a location and were subjected to certain conditions that our students fortunately are not. Yes, I'm glad that's in place and glad it's going to be a permanent piece.
Not to be all sunshine and roses.
Yeah, I was going to
with it.
mention
You're
that,
gonna-
correct, yeah.
the weather.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
If they cancel transportation too.
Yeah.
So we end up with kids that are then don't have transportation, or open choice kids don't have
Yeah,
transportation.
oftentimes with
You mean if they cancel and we don't?
Yes.
Correct. Oftentimes with a snow day, for example, you'll see that Hartford will cancel as soon as they put a parking ban in place, because the Hartford plan is, once they have a parking ban, everyone's to park at the schools. They usually then have a day longer than we do with another snow day, because it takes them then another day to get their cars out of the schools so that they can open up the schools. And unfortunately, and one of the things we're working with CREC on, is when Hartford closes, CREC closes, and all the CREC academies you'll see will close as well. And it's that same reason they share a transportation company. And so when CREC isn't running their buses for Hartford, they don't run any of the open choice buses as well. So our kids wind up having to be at home on a day when Conard or Hall may be open. Or any of our schools. Any of our schools are open.
Are they pardon me.
They're not penalized from our standpoint, no, and we certainly work with them, but it's just, it's a discrepancy that we're aware of and we're trying to work with CREC on, but it's tough because it's not a fault in our system. It's just the nature of theirs, really.
So they're not penalized, but, they're missing.
They're missing instruction.
And I was surprised too, and I didn't realize this, is that when we had our snow day, my daughter wanted to do all her homework the day before. And she goes, yeah, Dad, we'll probably have a snow day, but I just want to relax tomorrow. So then she was upstairs all day doing homework. I said, what happened? She goes, oh, we got more homework because it was sent online. And I'm not complaining, it's just that's actually pretty good, that you can get on a day where you have a snow day, the kids are actually still home doing homework
And that's
from
the
the
Google
day they're missing.
platform. Google platform.
So I'm hoping that exists for the open choice kids as well.
It does, but
as-
it's different
at
if you're a
different
fourth
levels, right?
grader.
It does, it's
perhaps.
tougher at the elementary
Yeah.
school. I mean, that's
How about
just,
the middle school? Does that work that way too?
it depends on the team,
Depends.
but yeah.
Because that would help, right?
It does,
You know?
absolutely, it helps.
And
And
I'm-
our teachers are aware of it, and they do everything possible to work with students, but it's something that, as you deal with one issue with the busing, this is another one that we've been working on as well with them.
Andy, I'm glad you commented on that, because I was going to say, with the relationship the teacher has with the students, I'm sure they know who the open choice students are, and since this is not a new issue, that they work with that student or families to make sure that they get the work that they've missed in school for that day.
Correct, yeah. And again, I don't want to fault CREC, they've been very helpful, it's been a great thing since they've been putting this in place for our kids. It's just a limitation they have in their system.
Oh, that's a good point too, is that's a Hartford limitation, but being that it's open choice, and we're obviously not the only school system that's affected by that, because, would it be prudent to look into that and saying, listen, on these secondary snow days, where they're clearing the parking lot, not necessarily snow falling, that a skeleton crew comes in and gets those kids off to the potential schools?
We can certainly, and we'll continue to have conversations with them. We can't dictate their busing on that.
I'm not saying dictate, but have the conversation and,
We'll have the
nudge.
conversation.
We've had the conversation.
Yeah.
Oh.
We've had it. It's not,
You know
it's
what?
not something new. We've had,
Okay.
yeah, but
You want
it's
the
just-
negotiator to come in?
Sure. Go get
I'll
him.
come in,
That's it.
That's it. That's all we have.
Questions, comments, changes, objections, praise, celebration, songs?
Just in typical order, as we go through in the next meeting, the town, the public hearing, typically, in a year like this, there's not many people at the public hearing, and then we slide into the workshop, but the workshop is really just answering questions that you have to us at that point, where there's no more presenting piece, so.
So, yeah, if there are no questions, there will be no workshop. The workshop will only
It's up
last.
to you.
the
It
next-
lasts, I mean, we'll be here.
We
because
show
we're
up and then-
Public hearing, but
The 2 weeks from today, the 28th.
28th, right. So we have a regular Board of Ed meeting on the
Regular Board of Ed,
20th.
yes.
Right,
We have the two open community meetings, the 22nd and the 27th.
right.
We have the public meeting on the 28th,
8th.
The
It's
public
set-
one?
it's Public ones.
the public meeting.
Yep.
And then the workshop.
Oh,
7 a.m., 7 p.m.
7 PM,
7
please.
oh, so the Ed liaison, I have it still the 20th, right? That changed.
Yes.
right?
The 20th is is a regular Board of Ed meeting.
No, the Ed Liaison meeting?
Oh, yes, that's at 5:30.
That's the one. Which one are you saying?
That's right. Oh, I was
The 28th?
saying the 28th is the Board of Ed public
Workshop.
meeting and then workshop. Yeah.
Yeah,
Second
okay.
workshop. Yeah.
Yes, the public hearing will be right here, then we'll take about a 5-minute adjournment between the two, then we'll go into the workshop. The workshop purpose there is to answer any questions you might have. We're not going to have a presentation prepared at that point in time.
Is that, so barring no questions from us, and I don't see that to happen.
Quick meeting.
But that's the opportunity if we had people from the community to ask questions, right? And is that,
Well, that's public comment, public
oh, that's
hearing
just
about
at
the
the
budget.
7 or
At 7 o'clock, they come. Typically, it's,
21 minutes?
no,
No,
public
I
hearing
think
goes.
Public hearing
I
can
think
go as
it's-
long as you
Go as
have.
long as you allow.
Last year, I think it went to like 9 o'clock or so,
Gotcha.
something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
okay.
The year before, it went till around 7:05.
Right.
And of course, people can also come and ask questions during our 2 open
When you're at the
meetings.
Correct.
CTO.
We just want to make sure that there's a
We
formal...
won't be at those meetings.
Right.
That's you, yeah.
And then we just go right into the workshop after that.
So again, for all the listening and watching public, if you do have opinions or questions, please do share them. You have 3 public ways, and then, of course, there's always our emails, which is just Board of Education, right, at WHPS. So feel free, we are interested in any piece. Are there any other questions from you guys?
The public service announcement, are we at the end of the meeting?
I think so.
So, I have to do this.
First, you'll talk about pops and jazz and the comedy musical.
Yes, the Pops and Jazz
Yes.
and the musical, absolutely.
And
Go
then?
see it. The Hall Connors girls basketball team is in the state finals at Mohegan Sun at 6:15 on Saturday, and it is the first time they've actually been at this particular playoff game since 1977, and have never won it. So there's a fan bus coming down. It happens to be St. Patrick's Day, so if you want to take your significant other out for a nice meal and a couple bets, you can actually go down to the casino, 6:15, and come cheer on Hall.
There is no betting on the game, just so you
I skirted that issue. I skirted that issue.
First there's the betting, then there's the game, 2 separate things, just to be clear. Absolutely. And while we're on public service announcements, I just want to say that some of us, at least, were at the Hall student walkout thing this morning, and first of all, it was incredibly moving. It was incredibly well organized. The students were very eloquent, and I just have to say, as someone who's not very good at this myself, it started at 10 o'clock, and it ended at 10:17. It was amazing. It was really, but anyway, it was very moving and safe. So I just want to give a shout out to everybody who organized it. Anything else? Okay, I don't even know, do we have to say formally, we are adjourned, or informally? Thank you so much.